Alright, that this is your answer. That some nalia and some long and be rita, some yagari, yawa che, the and yagati, yamne choko warriors. Sandine zada, di chebala, and Lapkan Kivishin in Chikore, Chisadi Kivishin in the and Mazalia Chike, I in the Kivishin in the Kuson to you in the Kipate, Tineza Kivishin in Delatin and Anzuki, Setita, Gewachima, Mondiokova, Tarbata, Tamjikimokova to be Lamia, Yamingi, Rimbachasan, Gewachasan, in the Chasan, Lamalatin, Kigore, Sisalamadi in the Tamjiki, Kiwi, Shire, Zada, Talamadi. Ranlaya, and the Jinchimbo, Grinchimbore, Chisada, Tetisamay, but Gewachimada, Tarbata, Tamjikimio, go on to be a lamb, Dunguba, Dumba in Zampemasi, Grinchimbores, the name. All this, and the nigger, Lamiki, the nigger, some daji, the rang, some of the rangi, Lama Tsukhin to think what is, Lama Tsukhin to Lama Tenang in Yamlijimba Sumba Nashin, General Sosuke, Doshin, Lama Ten, Tizalamadi, and then Zawar. 도시 덴데니 바 도시의 심주지도 라마디 연대 탐지게 자와 임바 지기 임바 통야 야보하고 통여도 데네 아니 지 베주시네 땡고 그래서 라마야 90집이네 데네 땡비 토네도 소수고 냠는 지가도 데네 냠는데 야고 용하게 탈침을 된다래야 라마이담 안에 상계단 저지 선발래야 진일로로 지에서는 소립죠 그래서 도시 그래서 다들이 조회된 뜻이로와
Good afternoon. So this morning we looked at the very first verse of the foundation of all good qualities, which is that it is a spiritual teacher who possesses these excellent qualities within, who is the very foundation of our spiritual development. And it's imperative that we rely on a spiritual teacher for, as we looked at this morning, to attain a state of lasting happiness. We need guidance in terms of which are the wholesome or virtuous minds that we need to cultivate and how to do so, and which are the unwholesome or non-virtuous minds that we need to eradicate and how to do so. So in dependence on relying on our spiritual teacher who has developed all excellent qualities within, we can gain this guidance and thereby come to develop those self-same good qualities. So recognizing this, we all want to rely correctly or properly on our spiritual teacher, recognizing that he is the very root of our path, our journey to attain lasting, stable happiness. And recognizing this clearly or seeing this clearly, we'll want to make continuous effort in receiving and cultivating teachings, because it's through this process of gathering knowledge and integrating knowledge that our process of transformation will come. So with deep respect, we then request our Lama, the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and our Yidam, seeing them all as indivisible in nature, or inseparable in nature rather. We request them for inspiration that we may rely correctly on our spiritual teacher. In other words, that we strive continuously to cultivate these teachings within.
Tangoresında doğuşuna da gevişin sedi azüke da gevişin sedi de dingan 주기 취 탈바다 탐지 캠비고 고마 람냠리 이름바 등에 gevişin de 마세기다 아데 게첨보레스디 안 템바이나 텔라테네 소수기 안에지 냠내지야다 니스망부지 냠내지다디 싱그레스 데네 싱네 소수기 라렌타에도 소수기리아 안 게와티기도 중그레스 Isn't the Lama Martin by no so to Lapkan Medu and the Sing Mare, Sibi, on Dushine, Yendi, Timbaina, and the Pen Yobata, Martin Baina, Sosalia, Dinike, and the Yonga but Dushin, some Stangores. Then that chick Dushin some died Lama de Tenet Susugeta, and giving Yamnaja Chazan, the Diniji, Chick Shingo Banza, Diniki on Dutine. Chetty na Gewakia, Gewa, Chimon under the Gowan, Mundio Gowan to begin Yamlin, but Gilaki Tuya, Tarbio Gowan Toya gave it Yamlin Gilaki Tuyaza, Chisada, Sanjio Gowan Toya, you Gewadi, Rangula, Lama Latiniki Tuyaza, Lama gave it Shin, the Lam Tamjik Zawaris, that the Nigis and Lama de Pa, 도시네 인데 통화진에 되네 수수기 라마들의 배주의 제제 수수기 대바당 라마들의 즉 대바당 그거 공부를 해서 라마 빼면서 야구를 했으면 대바세다 되니기 계셔요 봐 되니기 연대요 봐 되니기 시한을 양한들의 판도제 도시 남년에 좀 받는 빼 야구를 선배게다 대바게다 안디 라마들이 제수 장쟁이 라마들이 냠는 땜바딩이 수준의 냠루 지긴스네 삼다이다가서 대이쇼게 셰바디게 삼다야디다 도르두셔는 티삼다이라 땅고거래.
So I wanted to be very clear the way of thinking that one cultivates when relying on a spiritual teacher. So one recognizes that it is our spiritual teacher who illuminates the path to lasting happiness and liberation, the lasting happiness of liberation and enlightenment. Illuminating the path means making clear to us how, what to train in and how to do so, in order to cultivate the various mental paths that will lead us to the attainment of lasting happiness of liberation and enlightenment. Recognizing the great value of this opportunity, we also recognize if we let this opportunity go to waste, if we do not embrace this opportunity, we will not acquire the required knowledge and skill, and therefore we will not radically change our mind. We will not fulfill our potential, and that would be a great loss. So recognizing that it's because of the unique guidance that the spiritual teacher can provide, that in dependence on our relying on his guidance, and relying on the guidance means repeatedly hearing teachings and cultivating it within, we will develop the causes that lead to further excellent rebirths, and even the causes that lead to liberation and enlightenment. Sorry. So this recognition then in the great qualities of our teacher leads to a deep faith and respect. So it's in dependence on recognizing his qualities that faith and respect for him arises. And a deep appreciation for him arises due to recognizing his kindness in 4 lifetimes having trained himself in this way and now guiding us. So this then is the way of thinking that we need to cultivate in relation to relying on the spiritual teacher, or the manner in which to rely on the spiritual teacher.
지긴 세디베 마세 게치마 샤고 다디디나데 아주 다 직직마도 요마다 디나데 기회신이 예천이 세다 기회신인데라 키슈데니시 고르 윤데 데니시 고르 세다 다디네게 닝아주 최년한 지고 로마슬리네 윤데 데니시 삼다가 윤데 데니시 고르 세 데네게 망부스 주해요 디나다 아주 뒤수기 베게 데니시 해콜하요 말바다 더드시마도.
In the larger texts, this topic is presented in great detail. For example, the various qualities, these good qualities that a spiritual teacher requires, these are mentioned in detail. And then one comes to understand the qualities that a spiritual teacher needs to have, and then one recognizes them in one's teacher. So there's that and further information provided on how to rely properly or correctly on the spiritual teacher. But this text is very abbreviated. So in dependence on your own prior training, this should come to mind. But in other opportunities, this can be presented in far greater detail. But we have time constraints against us, so the presentation is quite brief.
부세데 베 장부 중중가래 미 장부래 교회요 말에 답집에 야고 차려 다데네기 개인지기 컨트롤에 시 야고지 야고지 제네 컨트롤 롭종 야고 차다 맞아세디 yendigelarale고 yendige 소소를 yendige 롭종 야고 제발라 소소랑 롭종 야고 신고고래 제 신네 마 롭종 신바제 마 보고들 롭종 간에서 제고 시제 롭종 这个第三的个人的好过啊这好过呢那人的样就不的了落上这个sem就有吧按不子了判别什么有吧嘛都但这样子两个都大概就是去什么样吧这判别什么有吧那可能也不见不是老主这边呢不做的靠脚看的也个去了觉得多就觉得那给微信的给的了哪里个就像不落上也不恰当嘛就脚把也个恰当嘛就说的给的脚把也不知道按这个落上也不按这个也不这按可能我们的落上也不这趟也不按sem就也不那不的落上也不恰个就是的的那个按这个落上也不也不呢按这个第一件事呢按这里刚刚写的第一主要了熟悉用过了的这样就记错了结合高一呢团结落上也不也个有个没的个团结也个有的按这个告诉的那也这个年的是用啊的按这个这落上每天给弄吧按这个讲的被落上有危险的个了按那刚刚忙啊团结有啊按年的是忙啊确定的那嘛行吧都写过了今天咱这个不落不见的呗嘛是节前么修车过的第哪年讲当然是这第什么member的他把的他们这看不咱们的亲戚给的给微信落去能别给微信写的你来讲呢节桥差对的是的节的写的咱们也早啊的节前么写的用上肉心的人
So teachers, general teachers in society, so not spiritual teachers or virtuous friends, they should still be regarded as precious or of great value to society because it's independent on teachers who are both skillful and also tender, that they can excellently guide their pupils or students, and therefore the pupils or students can turn out well both in terms of knowledge and skills gained, but also in terms of their character. And one tends to find in societies where the population is generally more educated, that such societies have excellent material conditions, and therefore those societies suffer from less material problems. Moreover, they have longer lifespans and so forth. So there are many excellent qualities in everyday society that follow from having an educated society, and for an educated society requires excellent teachers. And if this then is the case for regular teachers, so much more so for spiritual teachers or virtuous friends, those who guide people to develop their inner qualities, their good character, in ways that lead to greater happiness and cohesion, harmony in this life, but also for lives to come.
那的那个都是那个在这个人的个嘛去这些，那的那个当然这个，当然就讲很多那个笑话的，对吗？那的那个人的那些呢，人就怕讲就讲土嘛的是那土的是，现在用在路地上了，对吗的？人间那边代表电上的，新多年个短信写有呢，人生更多因波连别落，根据没把结果的经历落不是。
So having looked at the indispensable outer condition of a spiritual teacher, we now come to look at the inner condition of the quality of the student. We've spoken briefly about the qualities of the teacher. Now we look at the student. And this presentation answers the question, do I as an individual have the capacity to actually develop paths that lead to liberation and enlightenment within? This then is presented in the second verse. The excellent freedom of this rebirth is found but once. It is very difficult to gain and is greatly meaningful. Understanding this, please inspire me so that a mind that takes its essence arises unceasingly all day and all night.
人间那边代表电视的是的，当然这个米律写的叫米律那里讲的米律里啊，代表的这个律典写去送过来，就是他等这个律典写的，在这里连接怎么样吧了？他别这个叫我连的了，这个顿着的那个就忙我叫了，在这个律典写的叫了别特别了公布印章。连接怎么的人才这个头发都是我写的，是嘛的， Bendigo lenging ye big, David Densati, said the Chesadan, Lama Latinji, and the Yamlinji 2 days, 2 hours, Carasina, Manzulia, David Densan top the hours. That did say this one, just the lenging ye, David Densati said.
The first line, the excellent freedom of this rebirth is found but once. So this particular rebirth, that is not only a human rebirth, but a precious human rebirth, is considered a rebirth of excellent freedom. And the reason it is considered, well, there are many reasons why it's considered a rebirth of excellent freedom, but amongst the reasons, it is exceptionally rare, and that is its rarity is the meaning of found but once. And why it is, in particular, why it's so of such great value, why it's so excellent, is its independence on having such a rebirth that we can meet a spiritual teacher who can guide us. In other words, we can meet a teacher, generate faith in a teacher, and be open and receptive to the guidance for spiritual transformation. This is what makes this rebirth so excellent.
Dorje lutin si dawa ke dan jo chu san bi ge den ke shue de ne ge dawa ke da jo chu san bi ge lutin de la dan ju lutin le go re dan ju lutin se da che san da yue dian san sia je che san dan ju lutin sia si go re che san dan ju lutin si de dawa ke dan jo chu san bi ge lutin de la na dan ju lutin re sia si song go re che san ang ju dian de mo song go re dan ang ju lutin de ka re se ne kyang ju lutin de dan ju lutin re da That Danju Ludin said the Karasila Wharton, Dawa Kedna, George Sanvi, Kishu, the nigger, then Yeding, you lutin the rest as you might do lutin and was water.
And specifically the word freedom, this relates to that this rebirth has the 8 freedoms, as well as then it's what's implied, the 10 endowments. So it's sometimes freedoms or leisures. So there's an endowments or opportunities. This particular rebirth that we've achieved has these qualities of the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments.
Benang juge mi na ya tinigi an chue ko ragi besne re ngeba yo mares ka se mi na an ne zo yu tagop chue an je chue she kan gi tinigi ga sa su ya me ji kan ji le ji de ba ina den yu tagop diwa de ne ko chue je ko ga ko re ma ga san chue she ko yo mar ba zo je da yu tagop se ge ba yu tagop se ji je de ne mo mo ma sang ba se de je za da yu so se ge Wombo mi Matonwa, the Amchu Magova, the Nina Chichiako, Mares, Wombo Masobe, Chichiako, Mares, Chisa, the you talk to you, Wombo Masava. Then on the Nig Nyawa, Ida, Dundro, Sum, said the Nyawa, the Durusum Makina, Chichiako, Mares, Chisa, the Sochiako, Mevare, and the G. That had setting boss at the Gavine, the Sochiako, Mares, and then Loktache, Roshi, the next given, and the Chile, Deva made again, and the Chio Mares, a Chio came again, Loktache and Kidovina, and in Chichiako, Gomer. Chisada, the Nigi Kiwi, Shini, Yabuchi, Yoba, Inaya, Mansul, music given, Chichiako, Ravis, and Regmare, Chisada, you taught the Yawa, Womba Saba, Yawa, Dene, and Denigi, and Loktache and Yawa Soba, the last hearing with Yawa, Deniki, and Chizada, and the Castle Church of Yomares, Chesan Tisulu Church of Yomares. Genezada, Dadan Anzu Ludindi, Denigi, and Top Mikomba Jet and Javares, Chesa Church of Yotibaches.
So this term translated as freedom, it's a different word from freedom in the context of gaining freedom from suffering. So this word freedom, which can also be translated as leisure, refers to having the freedom or the leisure to engage in the Dharma. Because there are, whilst there are 8 states of freedom, there are 8 states of non-freedom or non-leisure, where one doesn't have the time or the opportunity to engage in the Dharma. So to look at these, if one were to be born in any of the lower realms, as an animal, a spirit, or in hell, or as a long-life god, because of the impediments that come with such a rebirth, one cannot engage in the Dharma. One does not have the freedom to engage in the Dharma. Or, if one is born as a human, but is born in an area where one does not have access to the Dharma in any way, one may have attained a human rebirth, and human rebirths, of course, are rebirths that can engage with the Dharma. But if in the area that you are born, there is no access to the Dharma, one cannot engage with it. Or if one is born as a human in an area where there is the Dharma, but one has a serious physical or mental impediment that prevents one from engaging in the Dharma, then one does not have the freedom to engage in the Dharma. And then furthermore, there are those humans who have in other circumstances, one could say they have the freedom to engage in the Dharma, but they have severe wrong views. So their own mind has accepted or taken to heart views which are entirely contrary to the Dharma, and this serves as a complete impediment for them to engage in the Dharma. So they do not have the freedom to engage in the Dharma. So these are the 8 unfree states where one cannot engage in the Dharma. One does not have the freedom to engage in the Dharma.
Che yomare sebe lokdane yomare anzugile yomare dine zada lokdachen dinan taware chezada ndusene ane la chereng bone kewane mare cheza dine zada anzugi dawa kasore mikomba kedan tawa zanga chu cheche ko hobyore cheche disu yede bare so da dawa ke da dinan jun jo ju se sa ya ji jo ju se di da dine ge 상태가 리딩 개발진지레스 지난 디네 자당 아주 땡기원에 아주 냠는 제게 땡차상디 튕긴 차상 상되어래서 오단단다.
So we ourselves, we all have these freedoms. We have the freedom to engage in the Dharma. Firstly, we are born as a human being. We're not born as another type of being. We are also living in an area where the Dharma is readily accessible. And we do not have any severe physical or mental impediment to engaging in the Dharma, nor are we prevented by severe wrong views that are completely contrary to the Dharma and would serve as an obstacle to engaging. So we have the freedom to engage in the Dharma. And there's also the presentation of the endowments or the opportunities pertaining to oneself and others. So those 10, these we all have. And therefore, we have the capacity to engage in the Dharma. So that's then the explanation of what makes this rebirth one of excellent freedom. We have the freedom to engage in spiritual development, to engage in the Dharma. But this rebirth, as it says at the end of the first line, is found but once. It is extremely rare.
제가 내내게 내외 된사디 신도 녀가 세대 녀하고 쇼레스 갈래하고래 갈래하고 녀하고 응안주게 미께와 지단은 저기 지베이나 든로다 제 미체베네 미디베 뉴뉴레 미께와래 디베네 공부쇼레스 지다다 저기 미께와 베 뉴뉴레스 다 미나네자야 denju yuliden sayado tobyal be kale khabure nye khabure shin nye khabure so jidanda jige nyawa ida dunro say jik nganjo sumyo da nyawa da ida say da nganjo 통고 말와 다 이내 다 집에 망부여 되래 다 디나네 아주 둔조에 통과하다 둔조 지금도 통외리 지외내다 다 지금 안주기 즉 부조마 호란 디인데 점블나 부조마 가서요 디삼다는 안주 디 예인들의 여지gen 부조마 지외내 안주 미단 디인데 안주 벤디고의 부조수 망거는 벤디고 미디 부조마디게 개자 굽주 고고래 아주 미디 점블나 미디 개자 찍마도 되는 시마도 요 말에 세상다 되게다 둔조나야 직다 말아 맞아 싸가는 이렇게 지 부조마 호란을 직다 말아 망보여 디메지 자다 샘지 둔조 샤와다 되게 직 망보지 안데 천나를 추나를 내리게 냐직다 샘자직다 말아요 봐도 매봐 예디바 근데 아주 통 마통와 되는 망보쇼여와 되게 둔조 당아주 미지베네다 미디 계자 다 계자 직 나네 자 차직마도 다시 요 말된 집에네 세상 되네 자다 둔조 전에 미디쇼 유유를 자다 미게 가서는 게디 토비에디 까오 깔래하고 있는 유유차로 와다 깔래하면은 유유차요 말와 제 옛날 심전에 뭐 깨와다 아주 유유게 김자가요 말 디가지는 있고 규단 긴실을 뛰는 깨고봐서 제자다 이제 깔래하고 해 봐서 톱하고 지금 미디 유유래서 다 디나네 자다 미망고요데 다지간 전날에 최 제가나 마찬가지는 근데 지게 최를 대바매 대바다 되게 최 케메는 바다 최 대바에나다 그런 레고코런데 레가자냐 레진 최리야 제가 고급 균에 말아 되긴 되게다 망고요 버와 되네 이제 집에나다 최 냠면제 최를 대바에 봐 최 냠면제 되네 아니 고급 유디겐디다 디나데 신도는 용용 차도래 지산 된주 류된세야데 아니 용용쇼 차대를 해서지 다 공부를 해서 제자데 되네기 배 신도 녀가 되네 토요일에 빼깔래 하고 싶으려 해서
The first line concludes with found but once. So this shows just how rare this rebirth is. It's not literal, but it shows just how very rare it is. And the second line is very difficult to gain. So that we have gained such a rebirth is because of the particular causes and conditions that we have acquired in lives previous to this. But those causes and conditions are very difficult to accumulate. And we can recognize this by seeing just how few beings there are that have such excellent freedom. So if we do a comparison between the large number of humans in our world compared to those living in the animal realm on our world, it's far, far more. In fact, walking in the bush around here, seeing so many ants, I sometimes wonder if there are more ants in the Bendigo region than humans on our planet. And it's quite possible. But one thing that is for certain, if we were to think of all the various types of insects, then we add the larger animals such as the birds and various mammals and reptiles, and then all the fish in the oceans and rivers and lakes, from the tiniest of plankton to the larger fish. Really, we see what a huge number of beings have acquired the causes to be born merely as an animal, not as a human being, let alone a human being with this excellent freedom. And then there are also the realms of unseen beings, which are said to have even more beings in them than those that are seen. And the reason for this, because it's not causeless or reasonless, there are so few humans compared to other beings because of how difficult it is to acquire or accumulate the required causes and conditions. And amongst humans, there are so few that have a rebirth that could be considered a rebirth that has these excellent freedoms. And again, the reason for that is because the causes are extremely difficult to gain.
다 되네게 저기 신도 녀하고 버려서 다 되네서 다 녀바이나 다 된첸 자들 아주 류된 다주 류된 미리 류된서 배 마시게 된다 전부 죽통해지래서 그러다 된첸 보스의 체들이나 소수가 당아주 된다 다 체디기 디기 주야다 동화 세계의 튕긴 주야게 삼다비네 튕긴 개심부 죽게 강아 가리 이놈아 강아 세 투야게 자와 개치무 기체 투가지레스 지투고레스 안디마세 안개와치마 원dio 고바 하다미 원dio 고바 토에게 된 토에네 된디 안 계획이 튼 자산 죽투야지 차고레스 안디마세 안주게 디슈베 슈바나신체네 코위에 가서 동화 타달래 자체 야 타르바시 토베네 데네게 타르바 토베기 냠는 제투에 토투에 차고레스 이 마지막 안주 sem자 탐지기도 상기고 봐 토바이나 내 톱투에 톱투야다 닌 톱지게 탑 냠는 이름 받쳐서 제투가 차고 그래. 제가 된첨보래서 집에 된다 첨부 두고 그래. 제래다 제가다 된체랑 아주 단주 밀리디 배니에 가고 그래. 깔래 가고 그래서 톱 가고 그래. 또 토바이나 배다 된들이야. 배 된다 개첨부 두고 그래. 제가 디네에서 배니 자첨보다 배주첨보다 쉬우지래서 그러다 된체
The second line continues, and is greatly meaningful. So this excellent freedom of this rebirth is greatly meaningful. So the reason that a person, such as ourselves, who has attained a life of excellent freedom, the reason that we can live a greatly meaningful life is because we, having met the Dharma and having the capacity to engage in the Dharma, we can radically transform our way of thinking. At the very least, we can have a better life. We can learn to take control of our mind and deal with life's challenges more skillfully. But that is such a minor gain compared to what can be achieved that it's not even considered a goal. Rather, it's considered a mere byproduct. Because at the very least, we can accumulate the causes that will lead to ongoing excellent rebirths. A rebirth such as this, where when we compare ourselves to the vast number of humans in our world, we really have an excellent life. A life of great, an excellent life when compared to the vast majority of beings. Moreover, not only can we accumulate the causes that will lead to further excellent rebirths such as this, but we can accumulate those causes which will help us to develop the mental paths that will lead us to gain complete liberation from suffering, attain a state of mind where we will never suffer again. And moreover, in dependence on this excellent freedom of this rebirth, the great purpose or meaning of this life can be achieved, which is to create those causes that lead to enlightenment. Because that attainment of Buddhahood means we can benefit all beings, and benefit all beings in the most meaningful of ways. We can benefit both those others who have achieved an excellent freedom of a similar rebirth, as well as those who have not. This is the greatest of goal, the greatest purpose of this life, is to accumulate the causes that lead to the eventual attainment of enlightenment. All of this is possible for us.
당한 저기 삼르시 담에 나가는 저기 리덴디 미 리덴디 베스 단다 개심을 두두두 세대 당한 저변에 미다 눈로이 누르바이나 삼담에나다 베네 자디게래 남니 풀투고래 안직 되네게 랑보체디게 슈마저 수부 시진에 밀레 슈체래 안 되네게 안디 제데 나는 저기 미디기 안에 지게 쇼보요 말데 이네 남주의 배주에 땅한테네 소수기 안지게 파 타릉부 조가야 되게 그 시윤 돈에 배주다 남주 배주다 전에 되는 지 남조쇠돼 안 남조쇠야다 되네 나슬레도 되게 내 나저게 교회에 매서야 되네 안수고 날이야 안지게 내 나수요네 대수야 면죄제 샤수제 파수고 직접에 야유다 되네 차상제 투고 받아 되네 춘나마 줘야래 안 사와여나 안디 사위기 강아세기 송급제야 안지 정모여나 정모여기 강아디 세야기 송급제 차사당은 저기 미 제투고를 받아 미게다 배 직야첨보 휴직 배네 도시에 다른부 조고에네 다데 남주날 봐줘야 다 되네게 안지 휴강을 봐줘야 춘나를 줘야 내나서 세야 안 다스 룸바델리아 튕견사야 동야면에 양직 탑랑신의 룸바샤난 수 어야 소소에 있는 파다야 되네게 답에 휴지 먼저 미시 두고로 봐 미기 남주에 삼로 배지 다된 아주 리든 될 제도 거봐. 대 dun주기 때나 되네 제가 제도에 매래다. 지 코로나 쪽에다 저게 믹스게 사바 제도야 가셔야 말다. 내 나서서나 아니 저게 면쇠투야요 말에 샤시 다투야요 말에 아니 저게 차와 첨부여도 아니 차와도 가야게 된다. 아니 저게 탑시 다지 제도야 가요 말 제가 dunroda mi rizikwe na tu chinanganzu migi da keshu shiho juye de bare. Jeza denegi duen chimbo tse digi tuya da dunga seyage samdaya na shiho ji che tuyage denegi keshu yoba di nganzu sebo tongtu warwa. Andi maze da du chine tse di maze da gewa chimba samda gewa chimba lada miyu goba toyage tse dele ina sosue digi yuwa gewa chimba lada miyu goba toyage nyamlen jeje gewa chimba lada miyu goba totuya yungo re jizadanga zuge gom nyamlen jeje nyomo ba chaza bangje tarbe goba toden tarbe goba totugo re di na je simje tamjige donda samdaje 잠니제 전슈 셈 검제 안들 파신 쪽에 냠len 제바이나 되네게 셈제 탐지 상요고 톱투와 용고래 지상아서 만주기 미류된 데레지 두고 지자 되네서 미류된 데 지가 된 첨보래 세디 두스네 삼단 된 첨보 힘바들 라트에 두고 거래.
So if we compare the situation for humans, so all humans, not just those with a rebirth of excellent freedom, but all humans, and compare our situation to that of animals, it's vastly different. So animals can physically do many things that we cannot. Birds can fly, elephants are really strong. But what makes humans stand out is not this body, but our incredible, unrivaled intelligence. Through our intelligence, we've been able to create machines that can fly. We've created machines that can travel the oceans, dive deep into the oceans, machines that can lift heavy weights. This is remarkable. But not only that, through the medical treatment that we have devised, we can extend our lifespan and extend the quality of our lifespan. We know what is a healthy diet, what that exercise is required. All of this we can know because of our incredible intelligence. Moreover, we can travel great distances more easily and quickly than ever before. There's so much that is possible for human beings because of our unrivaled human intelligence. What this all comes down to is that through our human intelligence, we can look at why we suffer and come up with solutions. Whereas if you compare this to animals, they can recognize too that they are suffering on the coarsest levels of suffering. This they can recognize, but largely they can only endure it. There's a little they can do to overcome some of the suffering, but largely they can only endure it. So in this way, we can very easily see that on the coarsest of levels, humans are incredibly fortunate. But then recognizing that not only are we born as humans, but we have this excellent freedom to engage in the Dharma means we can intentionally accumulate causes to have further excellent rebirths in lifetimes to come. Moreover, we can accumulate the causes that will lead or enable our progression towards the attainment of our own complete freedom from suffering. And moreover, for the sake of our suffering mother sentient beings, we can accumulate the causes to become Buddhas, and thereby be of greatest benefit to all beings.
여상 당하는 저기 미디게 두스는 약보 체배는 빼 마시 판도 첨부 개첨부 제투야 여바지. 다지게 양 두부지 약보 마셔지 엠바라 체배네. 다 되네게 미지기 코로나 삼로 따제 안지 빼 지기 디토네 천자릭 다 말아 누바 첨부 소에네. 제 뒤수지에 까마지 나래야 다시하면 빼마시비 미몽보 쇠투야다 강발라서 봐 깔래기 로망보 깔래기 쇠시게 되게 뒤수치 통로지 날이야 또시 매버스 투야게 좀 제도 신의 용지고로 와다딩한 주대서 아주대사 통쇼수기 봐 차대요 봐 되네자다 된디기 얇게 차베네 취재자라던 빼마시 야보시고지 판도요 봐지 다지 뇌세 제반에 취재자라다 되네 토네 빼 진뇌체 첨부 제도에 아주 미제투고 얼마도 눈로기 펜바이네 제라제라 제토야메 뇌세로 제베나 디지 제제라 제토야 민도아 제사데 아주 미델이야 데네기 미 루딘델이야 남주 삼로 따나베 남주 비슈 베제타예 남주 디슈 지야데 제 남주 베제타 제 남주 베제 야고 따네 그래서 판도 라신이가라 판도 개치 못 두가 남주의 비주 로바치 따면은 라신이가라 강하게 개치 첨부 휴제 돼야 돼 아주 밀도와 제가 디네자다 나도 된친스도 당아주게 팬잉게 전에 팬배천에 삼당 거래 제가 당아주 비게 팬의 루딘 딜에 때네 남주의 비주 다지 판도 개치 뭐 제반에 오지 제토에 여반자 된친벌에 해서지
So, independence on this unrivaled human intelligence, we've built over generations, in fact over centuries, these large interactive interdependent communities whereby we work directly for each other to benefit each other, and indirectly our endeavors benefit each other. And we see this in our growing societies, that these societies that have been built around the world, some are relatively new, others have been around for centuries. So this all comes about, these interactive, beneficial communities come about independence on our remarkable human intelligence. But in this human intelligence, though, does not only lead to good. It can also be perverted, used in ways that bring great harm and destruction. And where we see conflict in the world between communities and nations, we see that what has been built up with care and good intent over generations or centuries, in no time at all can be destroyed. Homes and families and communities can be destroyed in moments. So this too comes about because of human intelligence. This again marks us out as very different from animals. Animals certainly can do harm to each other. They kill each other, they eat each other alive, but they do this only on a very limited scale. One animal can only hurt a small number of others. But humans, we can do so much harm. But so too, because of this great power of our intelligence, we can do so much benefit. And this we don't really recognize. We see ourselves as quite ordinary, as mundane, but we all possess tremendous potential because of this intelligence. But we need to use it wisely, skillfully. And if we do so, we therefore will end up living a life that is greatly meaningful.
안도 삼다제 아주게 된 첨보래 미유 된주 리딘 세야되다 된다 첨보슈 주택 되네기 게 첨보슈래 세대 안도 삼다 도 삼다되다 대배ing어도 이해가와래 세대 대니가 위 김제 세대 다고 되네기 토비아데 깔래 하고 싶으래 세고로 왔다 인비 김제 가르세는 아주게 다 맞아 넘버 3 예비기 가르세네 차사 신 규단建了 된의 중화스 송거래 제가 대자랑 저 단주기 리딘 토바디 유단建제了 된의 주고거래 제가 단주기 리딘의 니가와 이 김제 가르선 이게 규리가 하고래 규주비에 깔래 하고래 규주비에 깔래 하고 인상 제부 리딘이 야데 깔래 하고 이 김제 디레스 제가 디 규주비에 깔래 하고라 와서 디 규주비에 깔래 하고 인자 단주기 리딘의 니 하고래서
As we see at the beginning of this second line, this rebirth is difficult to gain. And the reason that, in particular, a precious human rebirth, a rebirth of excellent freedom, is difficult to gain, is because a rebirth is a dependent arising. It has come about, each and every rebirth is a dependent arising in that it comes about independence on causes and conditions. And because the causes and conditions are so difficult to gain, the result of a rebirth of excellent freedom is difficult to gain.
언데자 당은 라바 삼다는 하는 중에 직전도로 가르고 있는 디마 서브네 답네 야 기그마도 된도 서브네 마담네 기그마도 규주고도 만족에 칭도 에볼 사임트나 디7 에볼 신께 되네 제보다야다 되네 직현다 세로지다지 가르이네 마직 답 되네 직계네 한 롱죄여 바딩아도 디세부 통고로 와다 되네게 다디소 세상 규단建了규的约반네 규дел에 되네 제부 연구요 받은 아주 디 차상의 세부 통전에 신바주에 내가 디 레고로 와다 당한 주기 민계와联系的 다디 유디 안에 제네시 계와래 유디네시에서 제부디니 미계와 연구를 해야 되는 저기데 제다디 토르야 지소나야 지고 롭종으로 지기 도나 지금 해 봐서 갈래 하고야 차 하고 가야 하고 봐 되네 자당한 주기 지사 미디어 아주 미계와 렘바 하이계와 렘바 냐와계와 렘바사 둔도계와 렘바사 차상 유카가 유대 바래 지사 유지래 사찬에 되네 제부 안지 셈제 담으래도는 기양야 저거 지사 유디여 바래 와 지사 당한 저기 전주 밀류토에 유디 갈래 하고래 저래 밀류토에 유디 사야 갈래 하고는 자데 밀류토에 갈래 하고래 디나네 간 전주기 밀류토에 유디 되는 갈래 하와래 이제 전주 유디 토야데 신도니까 니가 와래서 좀 된지 숨어래
So this understanding of cause and effect, on a rough level, this is generally accepted in society. If a farmer wants to be a farmer of a particular type of crop, they know they have to acquire a number of causes and conditions. Let's say someone has a large block of land and they say, I'm going to be an apple farmer. Then they will need to check that soil to make sure it's suitable for apples and the climate in that region, whether it's suitable for the growing of apples. They'll need to plant the seeds of the particular apple variety they want to grow. And then they'll have to nurture those seeds over a number of years, growing their trees. And then in addition to that, in addition to these causes, their fruit trees will eventually bear apples. But that doesn't yet make them a adequately qualified apple farmer. They need further conditions. They need to be able to pick all those apples, get them to market, and so forth. So many causes are required to be accumulated over a considerable period to bring about a desired result. So this presentation of cause and effect like this is widely understood and accepted because it's visible. But the causes that lead to a rebirth, whether it's a rebirth as a human, whether it's rebirth as a human who has excellent freedom, or whether it's rebirth in as an animal in one of the lower realms, those causes are not visible. Therefore, they are not known by our society, and therefore they are not taught. But Buddhism presents these causes. What are the causes that lead to rebirth in the lower realms? What are the causes that lead to rebirth as a human? And the causes that lead to a rebirth that is considered a precious human rebirth, a rebirth of excellent freedom. And those causes that lead to a rebirth of excellent freedom, these are difficult to accumulate. And because those causes are difficult to accumulate, the result is rare.
내내 자당 전에 미계의 유 삼로 가르당 유간을 쓰레세디 안주 수름송에 대해서 그렇다 수름송에 저기 미계와래 하다 미계와래 규례 지산도 쓰네 또 수름송에 간을 라그레스나 소소 류가 예수님이 간에 샬이야 네버 지금에 선배 삼로디 다들 수름송을 지다 니 샬이야 셴 속수 지금에 선배 삼다야 셴기 꾸마고 잘라 꾸마고 매 선배 삼다야 셴리야 준식이 매 선배 삼다야 니 셴고 홀당이 매 선배 삼다 두체네 셴리야 네비게 자와 셴리야 체외 자와디 싸우기네 지금에 선배이다 류가 예수님이 간에 셴리야 네비 자와 싸우기네 지금에 선배 삼로 쇼르와다 디 삼다야디 아주 수름이라고 하다 디 삼로디 가제 망아 땅토면 가제 뉴버 체유는 디섬다이딩 안쪽에 개와처 미게 유래 하게 규처 하다 미게나 섬로 디 땅고 디섬다베는 섬로 가제 슈크체도 스타베는 데네 디 안쪽에 하다 미게 규사고 해제를 제자데 데네자 수름소야디 갈래 하보로와 먼저 셴리아 람사 코르기 쇼쇼 코르기야다데 코르기 메스 베셜 셰디 람상 코르데게 디나 기쇼절레 라와다 주인셰야다 소소되스 고홀 지게 되나 주야다 가르나 주인셰레 라와 미고르다 뇌세셰야 지게 레라와 제가 되네 수름송에 갈래 하보래 제가 되네 수름송에 갈래 하고 인자 맞이 미르딘 토야 갈래 하고 차되래 규사에 갈래 하고 제가데 유리 링아이스 예제되면 수름송에 되래 디 맞아 미게 규다 살게 규디들에서
So to look then at these causes which are difficult to gain and therefore a excellent freedom of a rebirth such as this can be said to be found but once, in other words, is very rare. The cause that leads to rebirth as either a human or as a god is ethical restraint. So what is meant by ethical restraint? It is, in brief, the being determined, so having the intent not to harm. That is it, the intent not to harm. So it is a consciousness. It is a consciousness which can be expressed through restraining our physical behavior, restraining our verbal behavior, and restraining our mind. So, for example, one develops this intent, I will not harm others, and then expresses it in the meditation. I will not kill any being. I will not steal from anyone. I will not lie to others. I will not take advantage of them. In brief, I will ensure that physically I bring no harm into the lives of others. Verbally, I bring no harm into the lives of others. And to ensure this comes about, I will take care of my mind, and mentally, I will bring no harm to others. I will have no harmful thoughts towards any being at all. So this is ethical restraint, where we really restraining our mind from unethical thoughts, leading to us restraining our unethical physical behavior or speech. And when we think of the various experiences we have in life, we know that in general we can be okay with our ethics, but to be ethical at all times, especially when we are challenged or times we find challenging, it's not so easy. To give an obvious example, when one's upset, when one is angry, then it is difficult to be ethical. It's difficult to have a mind that does not want to express any harm to others. All too often, we want, and we may actually do so, say something harmful to others. We may even physically act in a way that brings harm to others when angry. So being ethical at all times is challenging, but ethical restraint is the very cause that leads to rebirth as a human or as a god.
지게 로치기 샬레 당기 세베기다 두신의 삼다 데네 삼다는 소주게 근데 뉴비에 가지고 토네 아니 지게 체션람 마트베게 샬리아 너 판도 주야 돼 짐바 때야디 두신 제고레스 디제바디 소주게 짐바디게 몽고바는 대봉하는 롱주 중고레스 게티게와 치마 다 된저 밀리토여디 밀리테네 데나 롱주 토네 강하면 중고레 된자다 다 소주게 토네 샬리 소수기 샬리아 펜베 가리기 토네 판도 제베네 샬리바 소수기 뉴베 가리요면 파 제제 두신 파 당기인 선배 당제 파 온두신의 진바다 당고래제래.
So ethics is the cause that leads to a rebirth as a human or god, and therefore it is indispensable. But ethics alone, whilst it will lead to rebirth as a human or god, is insufficient in terms of having a life that is at the very least comfortable, and is insufficient to lead to a fully developed life of excellent freedom. Further causes are required. So the first additional cause is that of generosity. So generosity, like ethics, is a mind, it's an attitude, it's the wish, in brief, the wish to give of oneself. So generosity is most often thought of in terms of material generosity, where one uses whatever surplus or abundance one has to help others, to help alleviate the difficulties that others are experiencing. But generosity can be expressed and should be expressed more broadly, using our skills and our capacity, whatever it may be, to help alleviate the hardship that others are experiencing. The generosity is a second cause that is required to gain excellent rebirths. And the result that follows from generosity, the result that follows from this attitude of giving of oneself, is material comfort, even abundance in lives to come.
Lu top dene tunje ya go yo bene da wong bu ma sang ba da dene shu bene ya chue ji go bra yo ma dene za da wong bu sang wa de ji ya go chun ya dan da la zu ge che de le sui bei nyam len che go re che da sui bei nyam le she di du she da xian da ge so so ya ji ne ba da gang ga de ji che bei ne pa ne bei ge len ji me san bei ge sam da de pa ne len ji me san bei ge sam da de sui ba se go re che sa dene ge Seba samtang or dene seba tangmana sebe tebo ma kewa chima delia tenju milu den toba dela and jigo dona siji de tempa mo ba changwa de yong re yesyor siji de tempa niba chenbo ni su yi na ga bu yong hai dene yong re yesyor jida de on ba changwa la so ba dene yong re yes.
So the indispensable cause of ethics leads to rebirth as a human or God. The additional cause of generosity leads to one having excellent material conditions, which is required so that one can have the freedom to engage in the Dharma, as opposed to being impoverished. But those two results are insufficient to have a rebirth that is one of great excellence. One also needs to have complete sense faculties and easily develop harmonious relationships with others. So this requires an additional cause, and that is the cause of patience. So through developing a patient outlook, so patience is also a mind, and it's a mind that stays undisturbed in the face of adversity. It is based upon other consciousnesses, in particular that of ethics. So ethics is the determination not to harm. Building on that, one develops a patient outlook, which is a mind that stays undisturbed in the face of adversity. And the karmic result of this is that in lives to come, we will have complete sense faculties, so our sight, our sound, our mental faculties, as well as having easily getting on with others, easily building harmonious relationships with others.
Tunyen yagbo, yawang denegi, tunyen yagbo, dene wongbo changwa, chazang jik, yuebe ne, chue che, nyamne che, gogora yo, sene jabi ngeba yo marwa, dene nga mi mangbo yorwa, de pe subo yagbo, dene wongbo changwa, tunyen, benjo, chenpo yuen, chue, de tole ya, shela dona me de, mi mangbo yorwa, na dene yenza, da dene mangbo na, chue che, kiwa chima dene, chue che, nyamne yagbo che, gogora ya, de la, gyudi karsa warasana, da zunri che gore che. Zunri sayadi, dada nga zuki kiwi jawa nyamlan chiyada, jik galala che gashin zhowe samlo tangayadi, zunri shiwa. Dadi chesang sosi ki gom jayala gawa, denegi ane chigi semba sangbo komya, ane ya lama la deba cheya, denegi chue nyamlan chiyabali, galala zhowa de, galala de, galala be, abu dengi mutu ni jigin sembeki samlo tangayadi, zunri res. Chesang ni zunri shiyobani, ni kiwa chema ten milu rakuyo top, and tsurim sungwi milu top. Dene jimbat jimbe nyamne jigwe de tunye yagwa sa, sebe nyamne jebe ge da wangpo tsangwa yagwa chungpa na dhele ya dada zunri yu gomyo de, ande kiwa chime ten dele ya dada gombi topye, ande chue je dunye yu dunba yu bata, ande galang la chue dunyo, jeza chue xia kogpra go res, jeza da zunri xia go res.
So these causes, though, are still insufficient to ensure that one has a rebirth where one will engage with the Dharma. Because there are many people in our world who are experiencing, first of all of the people in our world are experiencing the result of ethical restraint, hence they're born as humans. And many of them are living in a degree of at least material sufficiency, which comes from generosity. And many have complete sense and mental faculties and have harmonious relationships with others. So this comes from patience. But they have no interest in the Dharma or the religious life. So further causes are required. The next additional cause is that of enthusiastic or joyous perseverance. So this, like the other causes, is a mind. It's a mental intent, a mind that takes delight in virtue. So specifically a mind that takes delight or joy or is enthusiastic about engaging in virtue. So for example, receiving teachings, this brings delight to one. Engaging in meditation, this brings joy to one. Being in the presence of one's teacher brings joy to one. So this is a further cause that needs to be accumulated to ensure that in lives to come, we will have a personality that is naturally virtuous, naturally wholesome. We are someone who will take delight in virtue, who will naturally turn away from non-virtue, who will not be inclined to having a non-virtuous personality. Moreover, will seek out a life of great meaning, will seek out the Dharma, and will joyously engage once again.
다 전주 좀바는데 개와치마 된주기 밀르르면 스톱이 규례다. 되네자 디강을야다 몰람으로 지켜버려지. 다 몰람 가르쳐 왔는데 소수라나게 되네신다. 이 개와치마 된주기 밀르르면 스톱. 아니 개위신이 생이대 된 바지 퇴진의 개위신인 디자인의 최슈시 냠내야고 지도버쇼 선배기다. 되네기 도시 몰람 자워야지.
Then the final indispensable cause, which needs to be accumulated in addition to ethical restraint, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance, is that of prayer. So prayer then is where one makes specific prayers that in each and every life, may I meet my spiritual teacher, recognize them as such, and strive to accomplish their teachings, accomplishing the Dharma within, and thereby rapidly attain liberation and enlightenment. That's then the final indispensable cause.
Dendelaya and Tunin Chasan Zomba, Dendelaya, Wombo Tsawa, Dendelaya and Chunyam Go Yoba, and a Givishi and Sini that in Batech, Chunyam Govache, Regore, Chazan D. Gudi, Ngabodi, Ngazugida, and Gewachima, and Denji Milu, Dendelaya, Yamnichako, Denji Milu Toyo, Gudi Dirida. Chazan D. Yamniche, the Kalekabuinza, that Denji Milu Toya, the Kalekabu, yes, at this one, Chazad, that D. Yamniche or DJ Venan, Gewachima, Denji Milu Toyo, Gudi Diris.
The 5 causes then that lead to a rebirth of excellent freedom are those of ethical restraint, so a mind that is restrained from being unethical, generosity, so a mind that wants to give of oneself to others, patience, a mind that remains undisturbed in the face of adversity, enthusiastic perseverance, where one is enthusiastic about engaging in virtue, and prayer to continue to meet the Dharma, to continue to meet our spiritual teachers, and to continue to strive in cultivating the Dharma within. So these are the 5 causes that lead to the rebirth of excellent freedom. But to develop those 5 causes is difficult. Hence, a rebirth such as this can be said to be found but once. In other words, it's very rare.
ane ji loyam la soba ji me sambege du samtane ane nge ya shenle chama chiksup la soba shenle ya nebe jawa sawa gine ji me sebe tanga du shine shogene so gedi dusu gedi jemba na yase di sam dang go yang se sam da we na cha de ji da ni da ne yang se jian se de de ne ge sam da de du shi da ju ni be che zhu go re she de sam da su rim se de du shi ne an de ne an je di je we sa je le ya na ju ge na ka那个县里啊，那些所属的农学的推荐开的有多的县里啊，是怕当个这个县里若几个身边个什么当过的，什么当就所属的，随便女边刚学的刚土的县里啊，那这样了都是若几土过的，这些边那基本上是吃过的些。
对呀，所以So this meditation then, in terms to accumulate the causes of further excellent rebirth, involves meditating on these 5 points. And the reason for engaging in meditation, not merely knowing this, is so that this way of thinking becomes very powerful within you. For it to be powerful, one needs to think in this way again and again, so that it becomes dominant within you, very much part of who you are. So therefore, I encourage you each day to meditate on, firstly, ethical restraint. So ethical restraint is the determination, I will not bring harm to others. I will ensure mentally I do not have harmful thoughts to others, because thereby I will not express myself through physical behavior or through speech in ways that are harmful. I will not, for example, kill another being. I do not want to suffer the karmic results of killing, and I don't want to do that to another. I don't want anyone else to suffer either. I will not steal from others, because others value their possessions, and I don't want to cause them suffering, and I don't want the karmic results of suffering. Likewise with sexual misconduct. And then also in terms of speech, I will not lie to others. I won't deceive and take advantage of others. I won't add to the burden of suffering of others in this way. And I also don't want the karmic results of doing so. Likewise, I will not engage in harsh speech or divisive speech and so forth, because I don't want to make others' lives worse, and I don't want to suffer myself. So this, you think like this again and again, and you develop habituation. And you do so several times in a meditation, and again, do this meditation every day. And then secondly, one meditates on generosity, giving of oneself. One can imagine or role play, giving financially, giving help and assistance to others where needed, and so forth. And in this way, developing the wish to give of oneself to help others, to be a good positive influence on the lives of others.
초진에 좀 되어라는 거래. 그래서 배는 저기 칼라하마로다. 되게 지 소소게 하되게 사마되게 되게 이네 견식으로 보신다. 다디소야 어떤 안주는 민아다 판도면도 유식으로 대디 삼마다제 다디바지 두시네. 대디나는 부신 부장마다 부디스 심진 빠도 매바 대주콜이야 콘솔전에 사도 콘솔리 심배 인제다 콘솔 칼라마라세 두시네 강아체도 디사베네 다 부르게 가시 지지수 자고로 어찌도 로도네 그 지시수리다 자고 지장이 디 콘솔 대샤베네 콘솔이야 로가지 지지를 소 만여바 야고용으로 콘솔리 심배 인삼데데 가지고 칼라라마다 인바다 되네게 판마도 보게다 되네게 다 심젤이야 부신다 디솔레 자디게레 닝제 삼제 콘솔레 진바인 삼제 두시네 당베네 진바 동외 선바에 요바체 진방고수 지고래 진방고수 다차고래 안디마세 랑기 제게 도로로시나 가브리엘이야 소소레 도로 쳇자바다 가브리 도로니 충자바다 소소게 닝베차 소소게 제 고야이 되고 매바로 지는데 당서 아다 판도민스 유셔바 멤버체 안 되네게다 점리나래 미 빠도 매바데 도로 강아 태일 막고야 대자대서 대대네 요버티게 팬네 빼야버려 삼제도 제사라나 두스테야단 두스테베나 대 진봉고소라래 동에 셈바자 둘로 진바 차고래 제사 안디 소수게다 라바도 소수게 녀람디와 자유게 소수게 안디시 다보자시베 셈제로 지어바도 콘솔 닝제 셈베 칼라제야다 콘솔 제야디베 닝제 삼제 추제야 칼라데 두신데 진바 차고래 엔디 멤비게 당한주게 구로 구송 투된을 주는 데려야 puya puya, and Susuki, Chebo, yet Mateba de Jimba, Ya control puya de Gasu Chebo Puya, the new Shesure, new Tesa Denege, and the Medoro Puyare, and the Jige Sosu Kalaros in Dambo, Masenia, Conjulia Chebo Puya, Puiton, Chebo Puya. Dine saya la soba da dine ge ne medo puya yuanjia puya la soba dine so sui kan ji puwe ne dine jimba cha ro就是动为是吧其实dine ge引进没去jimba sa de be jia qian bo shu ta ji ge dang tu gu wo ma tu tu na ya bo wa ma tu ne de jimba da ya ge nyam ne jiu go xiu mang bu yue de ba de ma zu zo sem la ra le bo de
So a key point I want to make with generosity is generosity, like each of these other trainings, in fact, all of the trainings in Buddhism, it's about training your mind. The practice of generosity is primarily mental. Whilst it certainly can and ideally should be expressed physically, do not think I have to be wealthy to practice generosity. Nor should you think that a wealthy person who is generous is necessarily more generous than just an average person who is generous, or even a poor person. Why can this distinction be made? Because whilst generosity, the size of a generous act has a relationship to the material substance or the amount that is given, it is what the most important element is actually the mental attitude. And to have a greatly generous outlook doesn't mean you have to be wealthy. Everyone can develop this. So, for example, an excellent way to train is before you eat your meal or you even drink something, you can offer this to the 3 jewels. You take a moment. You either recite an offering prayer, but with meaning, or you just imagine giving to the 3 jewels and imagine great benefit thereby coming to all beings. Costs nothing, and you then enjoy your meal, and merit has been created. Then at the end of your meal, you have some leftovers. Then instead of just putting that in the bin, you can rather use this to help alleviate the suffering of others. And you can give those leftovers to an animal, whether it's your pet or whether it's insects outside. You can use your leftovers, so something that really is costing you nothing, but you can use it to alleviate the suffering of others. How you make that offering, though, is what's really important. In that you can just throw the leftovers into your pet's bowl or out into the garden with no real thought. And that's not much of an act of generosity. But doing that same physical action, but with a very different attitude, will make that same physical act greatly meritorious, a great act of generosity. So, for example, when giving leftovers to animals outside, think to yourself, by the animals who eat this, may they suffer less. May they, by gaining easy access to food, not kill and eat others. And in this way, you create more merit. You can add to this with the aspiration, by giving to this one, may I, and this merit, may I be able to give to all. And may I give to all, not just mere material abundance, but may I give them the Dharma and help lead them to enlightenment. And thereby, your same act of generosity is worth so much more. Likewise, your wardrobe at home, which has maybe many outfits that you don't wear that often, if you don't need them, then give them to a charity or someone you know in need, and do so not merely as, I'm disposing, I'm making space in my cupboard, now I can buy more, but do so with a real understanding that there'll be someone who gets this, and for them it's ideal. They've been looking for something like this at a price they can afford, and the joy that arises within them. You can even perhaps think of a parent finding something for their children, or for a parent for their adult children, and the joy that brings to them at finding something they like and they need and can afford. And in this way, the same act of generosity is greatly amplified, much more powerful. So generosity is expressed in two ways. One direction is towards our fellow ordinary beings. And this then is, as we say, generosity can be called giving. And then the generosity which is that of offering. And this is then made to the Lama and 3 jewels. And there one can think of, for example, as mentioned earlier, offering your meal or your drink before you have it to the 3 jewels, making offerings on your shrine of water bowls or flowers or incense. And here, like with offerings to fellow suffering beings, what's most important is not what you offer. Whilst that carries value, the most important thing is the attitude, the intent. It's because generosity, like all other trainings, is mental. Therefore, you're training your mind, developing this attitude of wanting to give of oneself to others. So therefore, one doesn't need to be wealthy. One doesn't need to have an abundance to be able to be truly generous.
That's what we are doing. They just show us that the Shengi Sule never just gang driven. Pa never lenching me. So get some contrast like Korea, contrast Korea never lenching me. Some big some tight there.
Then patience. So patience again, a mental attitude. It's an attitude of I will not respond with harm, or a mind that stays undisturbed, relaxed and spacious in the face of adversity.
That's when you say in Suzuki Kawachik, Suzuki Kawachi, I Johnson said, Delia, Gawaki, and then a mom, but the Mutuji, the Yamlichi, send some time, that's when you Chakore.
The fourth is that of enthusiastic perseverance, where one takes delight in virtue, and the result of this enthusiasm is that one wants to continue to do so. That's the immediate result. One will, because one takes delight in virtue, one will keep doing so.
Is that Benanga Tsudimski, Suzuki Lunga is Nijitumime, Jigme, and Tsudimji to some tane, and Jelia, or I think it didn't jail, pay our Jones and Sosaka, Mahobaning and Moody chickens and some tire. To Suzuki, that don't we send a Jimba sometime to Suzuki, Lulonja, Kadis, Shelia, Robert Jim, Pando chickens and some dance, Jelia, or that thing it didn't sometime pay our Jones, Mahomba and Moody chickens and some tire. The nigger serving Yamnachi to serve some diet, or the need some diet, Yahu Jones, or that made the Mahomba and Moody chickens and some time. Lucia the Junju said that, or to get our chest and the thingy, the bear Yahu Jones was a Delia, Galana jet, thinking Moody chicken, some diet.
Enthusiastic perseverance can and should be done with the other meditations. So, for example, when meditating on generosity or being actually, like physically generous, delight in this. Take great joy in what you have done. Even if it's just on the mental level, where you are imagining alleviating the suffering of others, giving advice that's really helpful, fulfilling people's material needs, and so forth. Take joy in what you're doing. Because this will mean you'll do it more often and you'll become ever more habituated to it. Likewise with ethics, in training your mind of not wanting to do harm to others, seeing the great fault of harming others. Take joy in this, delight in doing so, because again, this will lead to enthusiasm to continue to do so.
On the names are done that you do shine, then DJ Molam Jadri, Chesadang, Niki Kawasasha, but the Yaman, Pay Johnson, Dinin Zadang, Kawa Dilat in a Mombane, Nikidina, Mudiche Kivation, and singing it by Titania Church in Yaman, the Niki Kivation, and Yaman Mutu, or show some big, do some diet, that Molam said.
And the final cause is that of prayer. So prayer is a bit different from dedication, but in this context, prayer can be expressed as dedication. So when one has meditated on the first 4 causes, or if one only does one, whatever it may be, dedicate that merit. And this dedication of merit toward continuing to be connected to the Dharma from lifetime to lifetime, to meeting the Dharma at a young age, meeting one's spiritual teachers, having a faith in them, easily developing faith and striving in their teachings. Dedicating like this serves to create that 5th cause, that of prayer.
On the names are done, you can do much toy, Yudi Kares, and that Chutum Sonya, Chimpi Yamnaja, Suvi Yamnaja, Tundri Yamnaja, them and Molam Taviating, I did down to get Denji Milumus to be good. Yes, I said that Denji Milumus to be good, Hako, Hako. Then, and that 데네기 토비에 덴주 루디 림보치 데델야 안데 지기 체디나 디기 투투야 개와 치마이나 라다 미유고 방 톱투에 냠는 제투에 람차상 귤레 제투에 덴캬바진 배 돈다 침보레 에서데 데네기 바데 하고지 된시 시귤네에서 데네 샤바진에 안데 가르쳐오레스네 인생군도 이볼렘비로 균심메바 개와 진유로서데 데네 니나 체 두세게 디다데 무디치네 냠는 제고레서 但냠는 제데 가르선 다데 대신에 샤바데 인생군도 닝보 랭고레서 닝보 랭데 가르선 단주기 루딘디 녀게기 토베기 유 아니 닝보 유자와 규디 가르선에 추림송에 진바 다야随便 냠내제 준례 냠내제 몰람 제데디 아니 닝보데 냠는 제고 랭고레서도 수수게 쌈나라 두스 냠는 제고레서 대안의 유미체바 님의 차직 제제 샤샤바 멤버제 수세 진이 니네 제투야다 님의 야는 님의 년지진이 아 님의 제려야 사람이 숨제데 게디도 두스 유마체바 제고레스 유마체바 제바는 수세 냠네데 야고니 고도 니바 추시체도 그래스 균신바바 두스 냠네 제고레 대대네게 냠네 제발라 낀친한게 바시 모야다 냠네데 야부 용투에게 돈다야 달라마 이담 상계남기다 야 진일라브로치 스네야 진 올라서 소deputy 주시네 슈고레서다
This rebirth is found but once because, or in other words, it's extremely rare because the causes are very difficult to gain. And those causes that I've just presented are those firstly of ethical restraint, generosity, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, and prayer. But despite these causes being so difficult to gain, we have now an excellent rebirth. And this rebirth is greatly meaningful because this rebirth, independence on this rebirth, we can create causes, firstly, for further excellent rebirths. We can also create causes for our complete liberation from suffering. And in fact, thirdly, we can create causes for enlightenment. This is what makes this life so meaningful. This is the great potential of this life. So the second line then concludes with understanding this. So all that's been presented. Please, now the end of the verse. Please inspire me so that a mind that takes its essence arises unceasingly day and night. So what taking the essence refers to is these minds of ethics, generosity, patience, joyous perseverance, and such prayer by cultivating them all day and all night so that they arise within us unceasingly. This is taking the very essence of this life. This is fulfilling the purpose of or the potential of our life. So again, taking the essence all day and all night. So that's the third line in the Tibetan. Our English is a bit mixed. This, the taking essence all day and all night refers to these causes, these very 5 causes, thinking about them at all times. So having our mind at all times ethical, having a generous attitude, being patient, and taking delight in this. So having this, and as well as prayer, those minds dominant within us, day and night. Sometimes they'll be at the forefront of our mind when we intentionally cultivating them. Other times they'll be at the back of our mind, guiding us. But we need to, now this unceasingly generate these minds so that they are directly guiding us in all that we do. To make that happen, please inspire me. So the Tibetan ends with that. Please inspire me. So here we're turning to our Lama, our Yidam, and the Buddhas for inspiration to have these minds dominant within us at all times, because that is how we take the essence of this excellent rebirth.
Yesa dine zada onu dushine samda nyamne che dire dine zada kadamba lama zu gar sungro sin ngara zu ya ngara zu ngama ga che de de lu la de chima ga ro de de sem la de so jesa da ngama ga che se de kewa ngama ngara zu de ji she dire churim sung jimba ta se ba kom zun ri zum monam jap tue mindu sem de 다디 소소 룰다 고레스 룰다 하고 그래서 제보를 때네 유디 사다마사 하고도 그래. 제가 디네서 다른 아주다 지금 아주 류된 차상사 온보 차상사 되네게는 튼연 좀봐 아니 지게 야 최를 제 대바 여바 고급 여바 최념는 지기 여바 인자 제자데 개왕아 망한 주기 주름 송아리 서버 공부 준비 좀 바래 되네 근데 지게 도시 몰람 잡이 어레스 디기 테보레스 다데디 간주 뉴테 되네레스 다 마음바나 되네 용구를 쓴도 다 소수 셈을 따고레스 소수 셈는 나래야 용의 수집이 되게 주되 수림도 송 되네 내 진배 냠는지 쇠배 냠는지 쇠류 냠는지 되네 몰람 답 되네 지기요 바이나 소수 셈을 되네 지기요 바이나 개바 제목원도 단지 밀르르면서 토그리에서 오래 되네 지기면에다 도구 말해서 그렇지사 다들 강지 치마 강으로 다들 셈나 돼 소수 셈을 되네 지기요 바이나 개바 치마 단지 밀르르면서 토그리에서 오래
Great Kadampa Lamas from long ago, they had an expression saying, if you want to know how you lived in your previous lives, look at your rebirth now. Because this rebirth now is the result of your endeavors in previous lives. So recognize you have an interest in the Dharma. This came from the prayers you made, as well as enthusiastic perseverance. Look at whether your sense faculties are complete, whether you easily have harmonious relationships with others. That comes from the causes of patience you accumulated. Look at whether you have a life of material comfort and abundance or not. And this came from your generosity, your generous attitude in lives previous. And certainly, you're born as a human. This came from your ethical restraint. So from this, from your life right now, you know how you lived in past lives. And if you're curious about your lives still to come, there, look at your mind. By looking at your mind, you can see the causes that you are accumulating, and you can have an idea of the kind of rebirth and circumstances that will follow from this. And wherever, when you look at your mind, wherever you notice, actually, in this area or that area, maybe I'm not doing as well as I did in lives previous, take confidence that what you are experiencing in this life came about independent on causes you created. So if you have the feeling that perhaps in this life, up to this point, I haven't done so well, know that you can change that because you're enjoying the causes, the results of the causes that you accumulated previously. So take confidence that you can do so much still. So thank you. There's plenty that we have covered today. We'll conclude there now. And again, the emphasis here is entirely on developing your mind, making this your focus. Thank you.